Patricia's perfectly manicured hand slid the divorce papers across my granite kitchen island. Her nails were painted a deep burgundy, the same shade she'd worn to our wedding 7 years ago. "You need to sign these, Sarah. It's what's best for everyone." Her voice was calm, almost clinical, like she was discussing a grocery list instead of dismantling my marriage. My husband Michael stood behind her, arms crossed defensively, staring at the floor tiles I'd personally selected 3 years ago when we renovated. The same Italian porcelain tiles I'd spent hours researching. The same tiles I'd paid for with my own money. If you're watching this, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. But first, let me tell you how I ended up here, standing in my own kitchen, about to lose everything to the family I built from nothing. I need your likes and comments to know you're with me on this story that's going to absolutely blow your mind. The paper sat between us like a loaded gun. I could see Michael's signature already scrawled at the bottom, dated today. He'd signed them before even coming to talk to me. That realization hit me harder than anything else. My husband, the man who'd promised to love me through everything, had already decided our marriage was over without even giving me a chance to fight for it. "Where do you expect me to go?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Patricia exchanged a glance with Michael. "That's really not our concern, dear. You're a successful woman. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Perhaps one of those high-rise apartments downtown that career women seem to love." Career women. She said it like it was a disease. How did I get here? 4 years ago, I was riding high. At 40 years old, I just cashed out my equity from Tech Vision, a Seattle-based software startup where I'd been VP of marketing for 8 years, $1.2 million. It wasn't tech founder money, not the kind you read about in Forbes, but it was enough to change my life, enough to provide security, enough to make dreams come true. Michael and I had been married for 3 years at that point, and things were good, really good. We'd met at our mutual friend Jessica's wedding in Portland. I'd been standing at the bar, exhausted from a week of product launches, when this charming man with warm brown eyes started talking to me about the similarities between building a restaurant and building a brand. "It's all about the experience," he'd said, his eyes lighting up with passion. "You're creating something people want to be part of, something that makes them feel special." I fell hard and fast. Michael was everything I thought I wanted: creative, passionate, devoted to his craft. He'd worked in restaurants since he was 16, starting as a dishwasher and working his way up to sous chef at some of Seattle's best establishments. He knew wine, he knew food, and he knew how to make people feel welcome. 6 months after we met, he proposed on a sunset sail around Puget Sound. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Woodinville, surrounded by 50 of our closest friends and family. Patricia had cried through the entire ceremony, tears I'd interpreted as joy at the time. Now I wondered if they were tears of losing control over her son. Our first 3 years of marriage were blissful. We traveled. Tuscany, Paris, Barcelona. We spent lazy Sundays reading the paper and making elaborate brunches. We talked about the future, about dreams, about building something together. That's when Michael started talking seriously about opening his own restaurant. "I just need backing, Sarah," he told me over wine one night at our favorite little wine bar on Capitol Hill. His eyes were sparkling with that passion I'd fallen in love with. "I've worked in restaurants my whole life. I know the business inside and out, the margins, the operations, the front of house, the back of house. With the right capital, I could make Bellissimo the best Italian dining experience in the Pacific Northwest. I can see it all so clearly." He'd pulled out a notebook, one I didn't know he'd been keeping, filled with sketches, menu ideas, business projections. He'd been planning this for years, quietly, carefully. The detail was impressive. "How much would you need?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Realistically, about $1 million to do it right. The real estate, the build-out, the equipment, the initial operating capital, licensing, marketing. I've been crunching the numbers with a consultant." I believed in him. More than that, I believed in us. This was our chance to build something together, to combine his culinary expertise with my business acumen. I'd built brands from nothing. Why couldn't we build this? But I wasn't stupid. I'd seen enough businesses fail to know the risks. So before I agreed to anything, I called my attorney, Rachel Wong, who'd handled my equity payout from Tech Vision. "Rachel, I need your advice," I told her over coffee at her downtown office with the Space Needle visible through her floor-to-ceiling windows. "Michael wants to open a restaurant, and I'm thinking about investing almost everything I have." Rachel set down her coffee cup and looked at me seriously. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not saying don't invest in your husband's dream, but I'm saying you need to protect yourself legally. Love and business need separate contracts. We're married, I protested. Isn't it all marital property anyway? Yes and no, Rachel explained. In Washington state, we have community property laws. But if you're bringing in 100% of the capital for a business venture, you need clear documentation of that contribution. Not because you don't trust Michael, I'm sure he's wonderful, but because you need clarity for taxes, for liability protection. And yes, God forbid for divorce. The word divorce made me flinch. That's not going to happen. Sarah, 50% of marriages end in divorce. 60% of restaurants fail in the first year. I'm not being pessimistic. I'm being realistic. You're about to put almost $1 million into a high-risk venture. You need protection. So I listened. Rachel drew up an operating agreement that spelled out everything in black and white. Sarah Chen, 65% ownership based on capital contribution of $890,000. Michael Morrison, 35% ownership based on sweat equity and operational management. We both signed it. Michael barely glanced at the papers. This is just a formality, he'd said, kissing my forehead. We're partners in everything. We filed the paperwork with Washington State. It was all completely legal, properly executed, and binding. So I wrote the check, $890,000. Almost everything I had left after buying our house in Madison Park, the beautiful craftsman-style home, with a view of Lake Washington that I'd purchased before we married. We found the perfect location for Bellissimo, a charming brick building in Capitol Hill with exposed wooden beams, brick walls, and enough space for 75 seats. The previous tenant had been a failed fusion restaurant, so the kitchen infrastructure was already there. Michael handled the creative side, developing the menu, designing the ambiance, hiring the staff. I handled the business side, permits, accounting systems, marketing strategy, social media presence, reservation systems, vendor negotiations. We were partners in every sense of the word. We'd stay up late at night, him testing recipes while I built our website and crafted our brand story. We'd argue about everything, the shade of paint on the walls, whether to go with round or square tables, if we should offer lunch service or just dinner. But they were good arguments, productive ones that made us both better. The restaurant opened in May 2021. Opening night was terrifying and exhilarating. Despite the lingering challenges from the pandemic, we'd built something beautiful. The dining room glowed with warm Edison bulb lighting. Italian music played softly in the background. The smell of Michael's ragu, a recipe from his grandmother, filled the air. Patricia came to opening night, of course. She sat at the best table, holding court with several of her friends from Spokane. I remember serving them personally, so proud to show off what Michael and I had built together. It's lovely, Patricia had said, but her eyes were cold. Though I noticed the menu doesn't mention that Michael's grandmother's recipes are the foundation of everything here. You should give credit where credit is due. I'd brushed it off. She was right. We should mention the family heritage in our marketing. I made a note to update the website. Despite the pandemic challenges, we thrived. Seattle's food scene was recovering, and people were desperate for authentic experiences. Michael's Veal, Saltimbocca, became the talk of food bloggers. The Seattle Times gave us 3.5 stars. By the end of year 1, we were profitable, something only 40% of new restaurants achieve. By year 2, we were booking reservations 3 weeks in advance. We had regular customers, people who came every week and sat at the same tables. We'd hired an amazing staff who felt like family. Our sous chef, Antonio, was a wizard with pasta. Our head server, Jennifer, could remember every regular customer's preferences and dietary restrictions. Michael was in his element. I watched him work the dining room every night, chatting with customers, recommending wines, sharing stories about the dishes. He was so happy, and that made me happy. That's when Patricia entered the picture in a much bigger way. Michael's mother had always lived in Spokane, about 280 miles east of Seattle, across the Cascade Mountains. After Michael's father died from a heart attack when Michael was 30, Patricia had stayed in the family home in Spokane's South Hill neighborhood. We visited her maybe 3 times a year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and usually one summer visit. She was polite enough to me, but there was always this undercurrent of judgment, the way she'd comment on my career-focused lifestyle, with a slight sneer. The little digs about how I didn't cook much or how I was always working, even on weekends. The suggestions that Michael looked tired, that maybe he was working too hard, that maybe some women don't understand that men need support at home, not another boss. But Michael would laugh it off, and I tried not to let it bother me. She was his mother. She was lonely. I could be the bigger person. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something," Michael said one evening in March 2023. We were sitting in our living room, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. It should have been a perfect moment. "What's up, eh?" I asked, setting down the restaurant financials I'd been reviewing. "It's my mom." He wasn't looking at me, which should have been my first warning sign. "She's having a really hard time in Spokane. The house is too big for her since Dad passed. She's lonely. Her friends are dying or moving to assisted living facilities. She fell last month and didn't tell me until a week later because there was no one to call." My heart clenched. "Oh, Michael, is she okay?" "She's fine, but Sarah, I've been thinking. Maybe she could move in with us, just temporarily, until we can figure out a better long-term solution. Just until she gets back on her feet. Temporarily. That word should have been a red flag the size of Texas. But I loved Michael, and I wanted to support him. His father's death had been sudden and traumatic. Patricia was only 68, young enough to be independent, but old enough to need family nearby. "Of course, Hasesh," I said, reaching for his hand. "We have the guest suite. It has its own entrance, its own bathroom, a little kitchenette. She can stay as long as she needs. We'll make it work." Michael's relief was palpable. He pulled me into a hug. "Thank you. Thank you so much. This means everything to me. She's going to be so happy." Patricia moved in 2 weeks later with 17 cardboard boxes, 3 large suitcases, her late husband's recliner, and a critical opinion about every design choice I'd made in our home. "Oh, you went with gray walls," she said on her first day, her nose wrinkling slightly as she surveyed our living room. Michael always loved warm colors growing up. Yellows, oranges, earth tones. But I suppose gray is very modern, very trendy right now. "This sectional seems impractical," she commented the next day, running her hand over our white fabric couch. "White fabric with no children?" "Well, I suppose that makes sense for your lifestyle. Career women don't have to worry about sticky fingers and spills, do they?" The implication hung in the air. Normal women had children. I was not normal. "You keep the house so cold, Sarah," she said on day 3, wrapping herself in a shawl I'd never seen before. "Michael catches chills easily. You should know that by now. He needs warmth." Every single day. A new critique, a new suggestion, a new way of letting me know I wasn't quite good enough for her son. She'd rearrange my kitchen while I was at work. "I just organized it more efficiently," she'd say when I couldn't find my spices. She'd leave little notes around the house. The cleaning service missed a spot in the guest bathroom. "We're out of the good coffee, the lavasa, not that organic stuff you buy." Michael mentioned he loves pot roast. Maybe you could make it sometime? I never made pot roast. I was working 60-hour weeks between my consulting business and helping manage Bellissimo. Michael had never once mentioned wanting pot roast. But the real problem started at the restaurant. Patricia began showing up at Bellissimo during service. At first, Michael thought it was sweet. "She's proud of what we built," he said. "Let her enjoy it." But I noticed she never said what we built. It was always what Michael built, or my son's restaurant. As if my $890,000 and countless hours of work had evaporated into thin air. She'd position herself at the bar, holding court with regular customers, intercepting them before they even got to their tables. "My son has such a gift," she'd say, loud enough for the entire dining room to hear. "He gets it from his father's side. We've always been culinary people. His great-grandfather owned a restaurant in Naples before immigrating." She started making suggestions to staff, suggestions that contradicted the systems I'd carefully implemented. "Michael prefers the table set this way," she'd tell Jennifer, our head server. "Michael thinks the lighting should be dimmer. Michael wants the music lower. Michael doesn't like these napkins folded this way." The staff started getting confused about who was actually in charge. Was it Michael? Was it Patricia? Was it me? The carefully balanced hierarchy we'd established began to crumble. One of our best servers, Jennifer, pulled me aside one night after a particularly busy service. We were standing in the back office counting out the register. "Sarah, I don't want to cause problems, but I need to tell you something," Jennifer said, her voice low. "Patricia told me to ignore your instructions about the new reservation system. She said Michael didn't approve of the changes you made and that you were overstepping." My stomach dropped. "Did you ask Michael about this?" Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "I tried. He said to just keep the peace, that his mom means well and we should be patient with her. But Sarah, she's undermining you in front of the staff. People are starting to wonder who's really in charge." "I'm in charge," I said firmly, along with Michael. "Patricia is a guest, nothing more." But when I confronted Michael about Patricia undermining me, he sighed with exasperation. "She's just trying to help, Sarah. She's bored sitting at home all day. Let her feel useful. What's the harm?" "The harm is that she's confusing the staff and making me look incompetent in a business I funded," I said, hearing my voice rise despite my efforts to stay calm. His jaw tightened. "There it is. A business I funded. Do you have to keep throwing that in my face? Do you have to remind me constantly that you're the one with the money?" I was stunned. "That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to maintain professional boundaries and clear chains of command. This is basic business management." "You're trying to control everything," he said quietly, and I could hear his mother's words in his voice. "My mom said you might react this way. She said you get defensive when someone pointed out that maybe you're too focused on being the boss instead of being supportive," his mom said. Those 3 words became the soundtrack to the death of my marriage. Over the next 6 months, Patricia worked her magic like a master manipulator. Every disagreement Michael and I had, no matter how small, she was there to interpret it in the worst possible light. Every business decision I made, she questioned to Michael privately, planting seeds of doubt, every moment of stress. And there were many in running a restaurant. She blamed on my domineering personality, or my need to control everything. I didn't see it happening. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I kept telling myself it would get better once Patricia felt more settled, once she made friends in Seattle, once she found activities to occupy her time. But Patricia didn't want friends in Seattle. She didn't want activities. She wanted her son back, all to herself, just like it had been after his father died. The man I married started pulling away, slowly at first, then faster. He stopped asking for my input at the restaurant. He'd make major decisions, changing vendors, revising the menu, giving staff raises, without consulting me. When I questioned him, he'd say, I don't need permission, Sarah. It's my restaurant. I'm the chef. I know what I'm doing." His restaurant, not our restaurant anymore. At home, he spent more and more time with Patricia. They'd have long conversations in the guest suite, conversations that would stop abruptly whenever I appeared in the doorway. I'd hear laughter, intimate mother-son bonding, the kind that specifically excluded me. He started sleeping in the guest room because his back hurt and the new mattress topper you bought is too soft. He stopped touching me casually. No more hand on my back as he walked past, no more good morning kisses, no more spontaneous hugs. We stopped having sex for weeks, then months. Every time I tried to initiate, he was too tired, too stressed, had to be up early. I was losing him, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. Every attempt to talk was met with accusations that I was being controlling, paranoid, or making something out of nothing. Then came the night of our 7th wedding anniversary, September 15th, 2024. I'd made reservations at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant perched on a hill overlooking Lake Union. I bought a new dress, a beautiful emerald silk that Michael used to love. I was ready to fight for us, to break through whatever wall Patricia had built between us. Michael canceled 2 hours before our reservation. "Something came up at Bellissimo," he texted. Just a text, not even a phone call. "Can we reschedule?" I felt sick. I drove to the restaurant, my emerald dress feeling stupid and desperate. Michael wasn't there. Antonio, our sous chef, said he'd left an hour ago. I drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Michael's car was in the driveway. I found him in the guest suite with Patricia, both of them looking at papers spread across her coffee table. Financial statements, legal documents. "What's going on, Maya?" I asked from the doorway. They both looked up, startled, guilty. "We were just discussing some business matters," Patricia said smoothly, gathering up the papers before I could see what they were. "Nothing for you to worry about, dear." It's our anniversary, I said to Michael, and I hated how small my voice sounded. You canceled our dinner for this? I'm sorry, he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. I needed my mom's advice on something important. What about my advice, Faye? I asked. I'm your wife. We're business partners. What could she possibly advise you on that I couldn't? Patricia stood up, smoothing her slacks. Sarah, perhaps that's exactly the problem. Michael needs a mother sometimes, not another business partner, not another person telling him what to do. Something broke in me that night. Realized I wasn't fighting Patricia anymore. I was fighting for a marriage that Michael had already left emotionally. I was fighting alone. The final blow came 3 weeks ago. October 23rd, 2025, a Friday evening. I came home from a marketing consultation with a new tech startup, one of my consulting clients, to find Patricia sitting in my living room like a queen on a throne. She positioned herself in my favorite chair, the leather wingback I'd inherited from my grandmother. Michael was standing by the window, looking out at the darkening lake, his shoulders tense. Something was wrong, very wrong. Sarah, sit down, Patricia said, her voice sickeningly gentle. We need to talk. Where's Michael? I said, even though he was right there, 10 feet away. What I meant was, where was my Michael? The man I married? The man who used to look at me like I hung the moon? I'm here, he said quietly, still not turning around. Coward. Patricia leaned forward, her hands folded in her lap like a therapist about to deliver bad news. Sarah, this situation isn't working anymore. You can feel it, can't you? The tension in this house, the constant conflict. Michael is miserable. We can all see it. My heart started pounding, adrenaline flooding my system. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is let them go. She said it so gently, so reasonably, like she was a therapist instead of the manipulator who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare. Michael needs space to find himself again, to run his business without feeling micromanaged, to breathe. Micromanaged? I stood up, my hands trembling. I invested almost $1 million in that business. I've never micromanaged anything. I've been an equal partner. We built this together. A partner who makes him feel small, Patricia said, and now her voice had an edge. A partner who constantly reminds him that she funded everything. A partner who prioritizes her career consultancy over her marriage. A partner who can't even be bothered to cook a home-cooked meal most nights. Is it any wonder Michael feels neglected? That's not true. I turned to Michael, desperate for him to defend me, to see through his mother's manipulation. Tell her that's not true. Michael, please. He finally turned around. His eyes were cold, dead, like looking at a stranger. I think you should move out, Sarah, just for a while, so we can both get some clarity, some space to figure out what we really want. The room spun. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. You want me to move out? Of the house I bought? The house I owned before we even got married? The house we bought, Patricia corrected smoothly. Michael is on the deed too. You added him after you got married, remember? Community property. With money I provided, I said, my voice rising. With the down payment from my tech equity, my career, my savings. There it is again, Michael said, and he sounded almost sad, pitying. Everything is always about what you've done, what you've provided, how you've made everything possible. Do you know how exhausting it is to live in your shadow, to feel like I'm constantly being reminded that I'm not good enough, that I didn't earn what I have? I couldn't breathe. This wasn't my husband. This was a stranger wearing his face, speaking words his mother had fed him like poison over 18 months. I'm not leaving, I said, forcing steel into my voice. This is my home. If you want space, you leave. You and your mother can find an apartment together since you clearly prefer her company. That's when Patricia smiled. It was a smile I'll never forget, triumphant, victorious, the smile of someone who just won a hard-fought game. Michael, she said softly, sweetly, maybe it's time to show her the papers. Michael walked to the coffee table and picked up a manila folder. He handed it to me without meeting my eyes. Inside were divorce papers, professionally prepared, dated today, already signed by Michael. And that's how we ended up here. At my kitchen island, with divorce papers and a mother-in-law who'd spent 18 months systematically destroying my marriage so she could have her son back all to herself, just like she wanted. But Patricia made one crucial mistake. She underestimated me. If you're still with me, leave a comment right now. I need to know you're here for what comes next, because this is where my story shifts from tragedy to triumph. This is where I stopped being a victim and became a force to be reckoned with. While Patricia was busy poisoning my marriage, slowly dripping her toxicity into every aspect of our relationship, I was busy protecting myself, not because I didn't trust Michael at the time. I did, completely, which was my mistake, but because I had a very smart attorney named Rachel Wong who insisted on documenting everything from the very beginning. When I invested $890,000 in Bellissimo, Rachel made sure we had an operating agreement, a detailed, ironclad, legally binding operating agreement that spelled out exactly who owned what, who contributed what, and what happened in various scenarios, including dissolution, bankruptcy, or divorce. Sarah Chin, 65% ownership based on capital contribution of $890,000. Michael Morrison, 35% ownership based on sweat equity and operational management. But we're married, I'd protested when Rachel insisted on this structure. Isn't it all marital property anyway under Washington's community property laws? Sarah, you're bringing in 100% of the capital, Rachel had said firmly, her dark eyes serious. This protects both of you. If the business fails, it's clear who bears what financial responsibility. If the business succeeds beyond your wildest dreams, it's clear who profits and how much. And if, God forbid, something happens to your marriage, and I truly hope it doesn't, you have crystal clear documentation of your contribution that supersedes community property laws because it was established as separate property before commingling. I'd signed the papers. So had Michael. We filed them properly with Washington State. It was all completely legal, properly executed, and binding under state law. Patricia didn't know about this. Michael had probably forgotten about it in the excitement of opening Bellissimo, in the daily grind of running a restaurant. But I hadn't forgotten. I never forgot anything when it came to protecting my financial security. I looked down at the divorce papers on my granite island, the island I'd selected, I'd paid for, in my house. Then I looked up at Patricia's smug face, at that triumphant smile that said she thought she'd won. I'm not signing anything, I said calmly, setting the papers down. But you should probably sit down, Patricia, because we need to have a very different conversation than the one you think we're having. Patricia's smile faltered slightly. Sarah, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're a smart woman. Surely you can see that this marriage is over. Sign the papers. Move on. Find some career-focused man who appreciates your independence. Michael, I said, ignoring her completely, do you remember the operating agreement we signed when I invested in Bellissimo? The one Rachel Wong prepared? He frowned, confusion replacing the cold resolve on his face. What operating agreement? The one that spells out ownership structure, the one that documents my $890,000 investment and establishes that I own 65% of Bellissimo. The one your wife made us sign, Patricia said, her voice sharpening, defensive. I made us sign? I kept my voice level, channeling every ounce of boardroom composure I'd learned in my corporate years. No, Patricia. My attorney made us sign it, as protection for my substantial investment. The operating agreement that gives me 65% ownership of Bellissimo, while Michael retains 35%. The color drained from Michael's face like someone had pulled a plug. What? No, we're equal partners. It's our restaurant. We're partners, yes. Equal, no. Not financially. You should have read what you signed, Michael. But you were so excited about opening the restaurant that you just scrawled your signature and ran off to look at espresso machines. Patricia stood up abruptly, her careful composure cracking. That's not possible. Michael built that restaurant, his recipes, his vision, his work. With my money, I said, my voice sharp as a knife now. With my $890,000. And the restaurant is now worth approximately $2.3 million according to the last evaluation we did for insurance purposes 6 months ago. My 65% stake is worth about $1.495 million. Michael's 35% is worth approximately $805,000. Michael sank into a kitchen chair, his face ashen. Sarah, I don't remember. I forgot about that paperwork. I know you did, I said, and I felt something cold and powerful settle into place inside me. You forgot about a lot of things, Michael. You forgot that I made your dream possible. You forgot that we were supposed to be partners. You forgot your wedding vows. But I didn't forget. I never forget when it comes to protecting what's mine. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, typing quickly. I'm forwarding you both an email I'm about to send to our business attorney, David Sherman, and our accountant, Linda Cho. As majority owner of Bellissimo, I'm requesting an immediate full audit of all business finances, a complete evaluation of all assets, and a formal review of all business decisions made in the last 18 months without my written approval as required by our operating agreement. You can't do that, Patricia said, but her voice was shaking now. The power dynamic had shifted violently, and she could feel it. I absolutely can, I said, meeting her eyes without blinking. I'm the majority stakeholder. According to our operating agreement, any major business decision, and that includes decisions about vendors, staff, expenses over $5,000, or changes to operational procedures, requires written approval from stakeholders representing at least 51% ownership. That means me. I haven't been consulted on any major decisions in 6 months, which means Michael has been in violation of our agreement, which means I have grounds to force a dissolution of the partnership. I hit send on the email. The swoosh sound felt like a victory bell. I'm also requesting a formal accounting of all business expenses, including any payments or benefits that may have been extended to non-employees or non-contractors. I looked directly at Patricia, letting my words land like punches. Like family members who've been acting as unauthorized management and possibly receiving compensation they're not entitled to. Michael's head was in his hands. Sarah, please, don't do this. Don't destroy what we built. Don't do what, Michael? Protect my investment? Exercise my legal rights as the majority owner? Or do you mean don't embarrass your mother by exposing what she's been doing? Tell me, which one bothers you most? Patricia tried to recover her composure, smoothing her hair with a trembling hand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Look at you. You're vindictive. You're controlling. You're using money as a weapon. You're proving every point I've made to Michael about who you really are. No, I said, and I felt something settle into place inside me. A cold, hard certainty I'd never felt before. I'm proving that you made a catastrophic error in judgment, Patricia. You thought I was weak. You thought I'd just walk away quietly and let you have your son back. You thought you could manipulate Michael into abandoning the woman who made his dream possible, and there'd be no consequences. You thought wrong. I walked around the island to stand directly in front of her, close enough that she had to look up at me. But here's what's really going to happen. If Michael wants this divorce, I'll give it to him. But first, we're selling Bellissimo. The business goes on the market, and I'm taking my 65%, which will net me approximately $1,495 million after legal fees and taxes. Michael gets his 35%, about $805,000. Then you two can use that money to start over somewhere else, maybe back in Spokane, where you can have him all to yourself without any pesky wives getting in the way. You'd destroy his dream out of spite? Patricia's voice was shaking with rage now, all pretense of gentle concern gone. His dream? I built that dream. With my money, my business expertise, my marketing skills, my network, my labor, I designed the website. I built our social media presence. I negotiated our vendor contracts. I implemented our reservation system. I hired half the staff. And I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply declining to continue funding and supporting a business where I'm not respected, valued, or even consulted. That's not spite, Patricia. That's called self-preservation. I turned to Michael, whose face was buried in his hands. Or option 2, you could ask your mother to move out tomorrow. You could attend marriage counseling with me. Real therapy, not your mother's poison. And we could try to repair what she's broken. But if we go that route, things change at Bellissimo. I want my role as co-owner respected and documented in every staff meeting. I want all major decisions to go through both of us in writing. And I want your mother banned from the restaurant permanently in any capacity except as a paying customer. And even then, only if she can behave professionally. Michael looked between me and his mother, and I could see the panic dawning in his eyes. He was finally understanding what Patricia had done, what he'd allowed her to do, and what it was going to cost him. Sarah, I need time to think, he stammered. You have 48 hours, I said, glancing at my watch. It's now 7:47 p.m. on Friday. That means by 7:47 p.m. on Sunday, I need your decision. Otherwise, first thing Monday morning, I'm filing paperwork with my attorney to force a sale of business assets. David Sherman already has everything ready to go. One email from me, and the process starts. Everything you've worked for, gone. Patricia grabbed her expensive leather purse. The one I'd noticed was new and probably cost $800. Michael, we're leaving. Right now. You don't have to stand here and listen to her threats. They're not threats, I said calmly. They're options. Clear legal options. Options he wouldn't need if you hadn't spent the last 18 months systematically destroying his marriage for your own selfish purposes. I was protecting my son from you. From what? I snapped, finally letting some emotion crack through. From a woman who loved him unconditionally? From a partner who invested everything she had in his success? From a wife who worked her ass off to make his dreams come true? Or were you protecting him from having a life that didn't revolve entirely around you? From having someone else be the most important woman in his life? That's what this has always been about, hasn't it, Patricia? You couldn't stand that Michael loved someone more than you. Silence. Complete silence. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in 18 months, she had nothing to say. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Now get out of my house, both of you. Michael, you can stay in a hotel with your mother until you make your decision. Take whatever you need for a few days. But I'm done being the villain in the story she's written. I'm done being gaslit and manipulated and made to feel like I'm crazy. I'm done. Don't forget to leave a comment telling me what you think Michael should do. Should he choose his mother or his marriage? Your perspective matters to me. I read every single comment. They left within 15 minutes. Michael threw some clothes into a duffel bag, his hands shaking, not meeting my eyes. Patricia watched him pack with pursed lips, probably planning her next move. They walked out the front door together, Michael following his mother like a child, and I stood in the entryway of my house, watching their taillights disappear down the tree-lined street. Then I poured myself a very large glass of wine, sat on my white sectional that Patricia hated, and allowed myself exactly 15 minutes to cry. 15 minutes to grieve the marriage I thought I had, the partnership I believed in, the man I'd loved, who'd let his mother destroy us. When my timer went off, I dried my eyes, opened my laptop, and got to work. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life, but I didn't spend them waiting passively by the phone. I didn't sleep much, maybe 4 hours total. I barely ate, some crackers, a banana, more coffee than was probably healthy. But I was busy building an impenetrable case. My business attorney, David Sherman, called me back within an hour of receiving my email. Sarah, I've been waiting for this call, he said, and I could hear him typing in the background. I had a feeling things were heading this direction. Let me pull your file. How bad is it? I asked. Legally, I mean. Can he fight me on the ownership percentage? Not a chance. Your operating agreement is bulletproof. I've seen it because you forwarded it to me last year when you were updating your will. The filing with the state is clean. You have documentation of the capital contribution. If you want to force